Welcome everyone. Today's video is not just a simple story, it is a deep truth that many people never truly face. We live in a world that is completely full of loud noise. Everywhere you look, someone is showing off their bright success. Someone always seems richer, someone looks prettier, someone has better marks, a better phone, a perfect body, and a much better life. And slowly, without even noticing it, you quietly start comparing. You unfairly compare your difficult journey with their beautiful highlight reel. You compare your hidden pain with their bright smile, and your slow timing with their fast results. And one sad day, you completely forget your own deep value. You forget the most beautiful truth: you were never born to compete. You were beautifully born to become. Today, I want to gently tell you the story of a young boy who completely forgot that truth. A boy who deeply believed that absolutely everyone was ahead except him. But please remember, this is not just his quiet story. This is your story too, if you have ever sat alone and felt like you are simply not good enough. So please find a quiet place and listen until the very end, because this story will teach you something that no school, no textbook, and no person may ever gently tell you. And yes, as you listen and heal, it will also beautifully improve your English. So please don't forget to subscribe to our channel as we begin this peaceful journey together. Let us begin with the boy who simply could not stop comparing himself. His name was Ethan. He was 17 years old, in his second year of high school. He was skinny and quiet, not the smartest boy, not the funniest boy. He felt like he was just there. He wasn't doing terribly in his life, but whenever he looked around, everyone else just seemed so much better. Think about Liam, the class topper who always got full marks. Ethan studied very hard too, but he never topped the class. Liam didn't even look tired. He somehow made success look completely easy. Then there was Chris. Chris had a perfect jawline, strong muscles, brand new sneakers, and a beautiful girlfriend. Ethan, on the other hand, quietly wore the exact same 2 shirts every single week. No girl ever gently texted him first. And then there was Mason. Mason had hundreds of followers, fame, loud parties, and cool selfies with celebrities. Ethan only had 3 friends and 1 cracked phone. And finally, there was Sophia. Sophia was the beautiful girl he truly liked. But sadly, she only liked confident boys like Liam and Chris, not quiet boys like Ethan. Because of all this heavy noise, he painfully told himself every single night, "I'm not enough." And in the morning, he wore that sad feeling exactly like a school uniform. At first, these were just quiet thoughts in his head, but very soon, it became his daily behavior. He completely stopped trying in class, thinking to himself, "What's the point?" Let us look deeper into what happens when you quietly give up on yourself. Ethan stopped going out with his friends. He thought, "What is the point? Everyone has someone, but I have absolutely no one." He even stopped taking care of himself, quietly wondering why he should bother when he was not like them. He would sit alone and scroll through social media for hours, gently liking pictures of other people's bright happiness, while quietly hating his own tired reflection. The sad truth is, he wasn't lazy and he wasn't broken. He was just deeply tired of never feeling like he was good enough. His loving parents thought he was perfectly fine because he didn't cry in front of them and he didn't scream. He never asked for help. He just gave a fake smile and safely said, "I'm okay," but in his own mind, he was silently drowning. At the dinner table, when they asked about school, he would simply nod, but inside his heavy heart he was thinking, "What if I completely disappear? Would anyone even care?" Because when you constantly compare yourself to everyone else, you painfully start believing that your own beautiful life doesn't matter. Ethan's biggest problem was not that others were doing well. It was that he falsely believed their success meant his failure. He didn't understand this one beautiful truth. Life is not a race, and everyone is walking on a completely different road. Some people reach their goals early, and some reach them much later. But everyone has a completely different destination. Sadly, no one had ever gently told him that. He painfully thought he had to be smart like Liam, look perfect like Chris, and live a loud life like Mason. And every single day, he lost a little more of his true self. He lost his smile, he lost his joy, and he lost his beautiful belief that he was worthy of love, success, or attention. He didn't want to be Ethan anymore. He just wanted to be someone else. One quiet night, Ethan looked up at his bedroom ceiling in the dark and softly whispered, "Why am I even here? What's the use of trying if I'll never be the best? Why was I made this way?" He wasn't angry and he wasn't loud. He was just completely empty. And that is exactly what heavy comparison does to a human heart. It doesn't just make you jealous. It tragically makes you feel invisible. It silently tells you that you're behind, you're late, you're not good enough, and you're nothing. And if you believe that cruel voice for too long, you slowly start to disappear inside. This brings us to the breaking point. Ethan was falling deeply, but absolutely no one saw it. That is exactly how silent comparison is. It doesn't shout, it just quietly whispers. It hides safely behind fake smiles and fake laughs. He still went to school, still nodded during his class, and still calmly submitted his homework. But something precious inside him was missing. His spirit, his light, and his true identity. Every single morning, he woke up with a heavy question. Why even try? Why try when someone else is already much better? Why run a race that he already felt he had lost? Why be Ethan when no one notices Ethan? It was a normal Thursday. There was nothing special and nothing dramatic. But sometimes the biggest changes gently begin in the most normal moments. That quiet day, Ethan forgot to pack his lunch, so he decided to sit alone on a bench near the back wall of the school building, a quiet place where no one usually went. While sitting there alone, he suddenly heard two boys laughing far away. It was Liam and Chris, the perfect boys. They were the ones who had everything Ethan didn't. They were confidently talking, joking, recording reels, and talking happily about their plans, their parties, their vacations, their followers, and their fun. And Ethan just sat there, hidden safely behind the wall, quietly listening. He listened not with hatred, but with something far more dangerous, deep hopelessness. He whispered to his tired heart, "They're living. I'm just existing. They're chosen, unforgotten. They're ahead. I'm stuck." That night, Ethan didn't eat dinner. He simply told his mom he had a headache. He went quietly to his room, shut the door, and sat in the dark, staring blankly at the wall for hours. Heavy thoughts started spinning in his tired mind like a dark storm. I'll never be successful. Even my parents expect more from me. I'm just average. That's all I'll ever be. No one sees me. No one understands me. Then, in the quiet dark, he suddenly remembered something. From when he was younger, maybe 8 or 9 years old. He once proudly drew a beautiful rocket ship and told his mom, "One day I'll fly high," and for a second he smiled, but then the smile completely disappeared, because now at 17, he didn't even believe he could safely leave the ground. And at 11 p.m., Ethan quietly left the house. No one saw him as he stepped outside, put on his warm hoodie, and started walking without any plan. It wasn't a plan. It was just pure pain. And he deeply wanted some silence on the empty, cold road. The beautiful sky above was full of bright stars, but Ethan never even looked up. He just walked and walked and walked until he finally reached an old, broken bus stop. There was absolutely no one there, just deep silence and an old mirror, cracked, dirty, and completely forgotten, hanging on a nearby wall. It was probably used by busy shopkeepers many years ago. But now, Ethan stood in front of it and, for the first time in a very long time, he looked directly into his own tired eyes. Sadly, he didn't see a young boy. He didn't see strength, and he didn't see any beautiful potential. He only saw failure, deep disappointment, and weakness. And suddenly, all the heavy pain he had buried safely inside came pouring out, and he softly whispered, "Why can't I be like them? Why am I like this? Why wasn't I made better? Why am I me?" He paused as warm tears slowly filled his eyes, and then he gently said something that no one had ever said to him, not his teachers, not his loving parents, and not his friends. "I hate being me." Those 4 painful words were the absolute breaking point, the exact moment he truly felt completely lost. Because when you deeply hate yourself and when you compare yourself so much that you start to believe you have absolutely no value, you lose much more than just confidence. You completely lose your beautiful connection to life. And in that one heartbreaking sentence, He felt absolutely everything. He felt the heavy years of silent pain, the cold feeling of being unseen, the deep guilt of not being enough, and the painful pressure to constantly become someone else. Ethan sat gently on the cold bench near the old mirror and just quietly cried. It was not a loud or dramatic cry, but a deeply broken one. The kind of pure crying that absolutely doesn't need any sound, just deep pain. After some quiet time, a soft voice suddenly came from behind him. It was an old man with a thin gray beard, gently holding a small, warm lantern. He had safely seen Ethan from his quiet window and softly asked, "Are you okay?" Ethan quickly wiped his tired face and told the exact same heavy lie he always told everyone. "Yeah, I'm fine." But the old man just smiled gently and peacefully said something that Ethan would absolutely never forget. He safely pointed and said, "You know that mirror you're looking into? It's completely broken, so whatever you see in it simply isn't the truth. Maybe you're seeing yourself through the wrong glass." Ethan paused in the quiet dark. The old man looked deeply into his sad eyes and softly said, "Son, please don't believe everything you think, especially when your tired mind is filled with heavy comparisons. You were never meant to live their story. You were beautifully meant to write your own." Then he peacefully turned and walked away. There was absolutely no loud lecture and no heavy sermon. Just pure, gentle wisdom. That long night, Ethan simply couldn't sleep. He kept quietly hearing that one beautiful line echoing in his mind. Maybe you're seeing yourself through the wrong glass. Was he? Maybe he wasn't weak at all. Maybe he wasn't late, and maybe he wasn't worthless. Maybe he was just sadly using the completely wrong mirrors, the fake mirror of Instagram, the heavy mirror of perfect classmates, and the loud mirror of society's expectations, timelines, trophies, and trends. And all of those harsh mirrors were deeply broken. He had never gently looked at his very own mirror, the beautiful one that safely shows exactly who he is, not who others are. That quiet night, a tiny, beautiful seed was finally planted in his heart. He wasn't completely healed yet, but something deep inside him had peacefully changed. He still had many questions, but now he was finally ready to bravely find the answers. Welcome to part 3 of Ethan's journey, the wake-up moment. The next morning, Ethan gently woke up before his alarm. That had absolutely never happened before. Usually, he deeply hated mornings, because mornings painfully reminded him that another heavy day of comparison was patiently waiting for him. It was usually another sad day of watching others successfully move forward while he felt completely stuck. But this quiet morning felt beautifully different, not overly happy, not loudly confident, but just wonderfully quiet. His tired mind wasn't shouting like before. The gentle old man's words were still softly there, gently repeating in his head, "You're seeing yourself through the wrong glass." Ethan sat peacefully on the edge of his bed and bravely asked himself a question he had absolutely never asked before. What if I safely stopped looking at others just for one day? Not forever, not for life, just one quiet day. On the gentle way to school, Ethan noticed something wonderfully strange. Nothing on the outside had changed. It was the exact same road, the same familiar buildings, and the same people. But his deep attention had peacefully changed. For the very first time, he wasn't nervously scanning the world to painfully see who was better than him. He wasn't anxiously thinking about who has more money, who looks much better, or who is far ahead. He was simply beautifully walking. And in that pure silence, he realized something deeply painful, but incredibly powerful. Constant comparison had been secretly stealing his precious energy. It was not other people, and not his difficult circumstances, but just comparison. Every heavy thought like, "They are better than me, I'm late," or "I'm behind," was completely draining him. It wasn't that Ethan had absolutely no potential. It was sadly that he was heavily using all his beautiful strength to measure himself against others instead of gently building himself. That day in class, the teacher asked a very simple question. Ethan safely knew the answer. He hesitated at first. Normally, he would stay completely quiet because Liam always raised his confident hand first, because someone else always sounded much smarter, and because Ethan falsely believed his quiet voice didn't matter. But this beautiful time, he gently remembered the mirror, the broken mirror, and he peacefully thought, what if my voice doesn't need to be the absolute best? It just beautifully needs to be mine. Slowly and bravely, his hand went up. The noisy class went completely silent. The teacher nodded, and Ethan finally spoke. His voice shook just a little bit, and his words weren't completely perfect, but he answered honestly. The teacher gently smiled and said, "Good thinking." Those two simple words felt wonderfully heavy for Ethan, not because they were big words, but because absolutely no one had gently said that to him in a very long time. And something deep inside him softly whispered, maybe I'm not completely invisible. That beautiful evening, Ethan quietly sat alone again, but this time he was absolutely not in pain. He gently opened a small notebook. On the very first page, he carefully wrote, "Things I compare myself about." The heavy list was painfully long: grades, looks, money, friends, confidence, and his life progress. Then, on the very next page, he bravely wrote something completely new. "Things I can safely control." That beautiful list was much shorter. His pure effort, his daily learning, his quiet habits, his discipline, his deep honesty with himself, and his gentle consistency. And suddenly, something incredibly beautiful became completely clear. He had been harshly comparing his final results without ever respecting his own slow process. He was deeply angry at himself for not perfectly having a future that others had carefully built over many long years. He was painfully blaming himself for not being at a place he had never truly worked toward, simply because he was far too busy watching others. That quiet night, Ethan learned a truly powerful truth. You are absolutely not late. You are just beautifully early in your very own story. Ethan then softly asked himself something that beautifully changed absolutely everything. If completely no one was watching, who would I truly want to become? Not for his loving parents, not for heavy society, and not for loud social media, but just for him. The pure answer came to him very slowly. I safely want to be stronger. Not for cheap approval, but for true respect. I beautifully want to learn, not to aggressively win, but to softly grow. I peacefully want to gently build something, even if absolutely no one claps. That was the very first time his beautiful dreams were not heavily borrowed from someone else. They were finally, completely his. Ethan deeply realized something incredibly dangerous about heavy comparison. When you painfully compare yourself, you completely disconnect from your own beautiful path, you completely ignore your own quiet growth, and you tragically forget your own unique story. He finally understood that the exact moment you compare, you completely stop gently listening to yourself. And when you sadly stop listening to yourself, you lose your true direction. That is exactly why comparison feels so deeply painful. Not because others are loudly winning, but because you are sadly walking away from exactly who you are. Before peacefully sleeping, Ethan made a very small, quiet promise. It was not a loud or dramatic one, just this simple truth. I will safely stop asking why I'm not like them. I will beautifully start asking how I can be just a little bit better than yesterday. That sweet promise didn't magically change his life overnight, but it peacefully changed something far more important, his deep direction. He was no longer exhaustingly chasing others. He was finally, bravely facing himself. Nothing incredibly magical happened immediately after that. There was absolutely no loud applause and no sudden bright success. But something wonderfully invisible had gently shifted. Ethan no longer deeply hated himself, and he no longer sadly wished to disappear. He definitely still felt normal fear, and he still felt quiet doubt. But now, he also beautifully felt ownership, and that is incredibly dangerous in the absolutely best way, because the exact moment a person finally takes gentle ownership of their precious life, heavy comparison completely loses its dark power. Months had peacefully passed. Ethan was absolutely no longer the sad boy who sat quietly in the back of the class, painfully comparing his life with everyone else. But let us be honest, he wasn't a bright star either. He wasn't a class topper, he wasn't famous, and he wasn't rich. But he was something much more beautifully powerful than all of that. He was finally free. His classmates still had brand new phones. Chris still looked exactly like a perfect model, Liam still topped the class, and Sophia still laughed happily with someone else. But Ethan beautifully didn't feel small anymore. He didn't feel behind, he didn't feel painfully late, and he didn't feel invisible, because he had finally deeply understood something that the world sadly never teaches. You do not need to be the best version of someone else. You just beautifully need to become the real version of yourself. And when you gently do that, you win a beautiful game that most people don't even know they are playing. Ethan absolutely didn't become successful overnight. He didn't wake up one magical day and suddenly become deeply confident. It took quiet time. It took gentle effort, and it took real pain. But he patiently made small, beautiful changes every single day. He built his quiet, silent discipline. He didn't loudly shout about his deep goals. He just peacefully started waking up earlier, carefully studying better, and gently eating healthier. He wasn't aggressively showing it off to the noisy world. He was beautifully building it all in deep silence because he safely knew now. Comparison looks very loud, but true transformation is always quiet. He gracefully stopped watching others exactly like a fan. Instead of mindlessly scrolling through other people's bright lives for hours, he gently started writing his own thoughts, quietly practicing his skills and learning something truly useful. Every single time he felt the heavy sting of jealousy, he softly asked himself, "What can I beautifully learn from this instead?" That simple question changed absolutely everything. He gracefully turned his jealousy into pure inspiration, and his inspiration into quiet action. He finally accepted his beautiful self fully. He gracefully stopped saying, "I wish I looked exactly like him. I wish I was born rich," or "I wish I had much more followers." Instead, he gently started saying, "This is my own beautiful story. Let me deeply write it well. I may not be there just yet, but I'm slowly getting much better. I deeply do not need to loudly shine for others. I just beautifully need to live for myself." He definitely still had normal insecurities, but now he wonderfully had ownership too. It was the quiet last week of school, and a talent competition was softly announced. Ethan's heart beautifully beat faster when he heard it. This was not because he aggressively wanted to win, but because many years ago, he used to quietly write songs and sadly never shared them. Back then, he deeply didn't feel good enough. He used to painfully think, "What's the point? Others are simply better." But this beautiful time was completely different. He wasn't desperately trying to win. He just gently wanted to show up for himself. So he bravely signed up, wrote a very simple, original song, and on the final day, he stood on that bright stage completely alone, with his hands gently shaking. The room was completely full. He took a deep, peaceful breath and beautifully remembered, "Your voice doesn't strictly have to be perfect. It just beautifully has to be yours." And then, he softly began. His nervous voice cracked slightly in the first few lines, and some people quietly whispered or softly laughed. But he bravely kept going, and by the very end, the entire room was completely silent. This happened not because he was the absolute best, but because he was beautifully real. When he finally finished, there was a quiet pause, and then pure applause. Real, raw, and deeply respectful. For the very first time, Ethan truly felt seen, not as a pale copy of someone else, but completely as himself. He didn't magically win the competition, Liam did, and Ethan smiled with a completely full heart when Liam proudly got the prize, because now he deeply understood something old Ethan absolutely never could. When someone else brightly shines, it absolutely doesn't make you dim. When someone else beautifully wins, it absolutely doesn't mean you've painfully lost. You deeply don't need a loud spotlight. You just safely need to walk your own beautiful path. And his quiet path had finally, truly begun. That peaceful night, as he gently sat on his warm bed with a small notebook, Ethan softly wrote one final line. "I'm not here to gently compete. I'm safely here to become." And that was beautifully it. There were absolutely no shiny awards, no loud viral posts, and no dramatic ending. Just pure, deep peace.